Dan Devlin for the Detective Dan Devlin Show, Honorable People, Honorable Nation. Well, it's a new year. If you're watching this on its regular time, if you're watching a rerun, then it probably isn't a new year. But I wanted to take the time to reflect on the fact that on each new year, we somewhat feel as though we have a new beginning. And with this particular year, we're going to have someone new in the presidency of the United States. And so it's an exciting time, but I'd like everyone to remember, regardless of who occupies the White House, the responsibility for what this nation becomes rests with us. You know that the name of this program is Honorable People, Honorable Nation, and you've heard me say it before, you can't have an honorable nation if you don't have honorable people. And honorable people make sure that the officials that they put into office, they allow to hold positions in our government, the people have the ultimate responsibility to make sure that they're doing the job that we expect them to do. Having said that, in the last year, we've covered a lot of different topics. The last program that we did was on establishing justice. We're going through the United States Constitution, which many of you have heard me say before, the statement of purpose with which many people refer to as the preamble to the Constitution of the United States. And of course, preamble actually means a statement of purpose. But I like to use that phrase, statement of purpose, because it more clearly identifies what it is. And that statement of purpose says, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to two groups, ourselves and our posterity. And then it goes on to say, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. It's my position that it's a simple thing for us when we're passing laws or we're considering even adopting various laws, that if we check the statement of purpose of the Constitution of the United States, and if we make sure that we're accomplishing those goals that are set therein, then we have little chance of going wrong. But it's when we step outside those requirements of pursuing those goals that we have problems here in the United States. The issue is our officials. Our officials oftentimes don't recognize that they do work for us, and the reason that they don't recognize that is that we don't let them know that we recognize that it is we, the people, who are ultimately responsible for what we become. So, what we want to cover on this particular program in depth is the issue of domestic tranquility. It's one of the requirements. It's one of the standards that the statement of purpose deals with. And what is domestic tranquility? Is there anyone among us who wants turmoil and chaos in our communities? Most people would say, well, of course not. But the reality is that some people profit from having that chaos and turmoil. And we need to recognize that they profit, and we need to make sure that we achieve that goal of having domestic tranquility. It doesn't mean that we're always going to have it, but that is always or should always be the goal. And therefore, in order to achieve that, what do we have to do? We have to look at the current environment. We need to determine why various things are happening that won't allow us to have that domestic tranquility, and we're going to be going into some of those today on this program. As I mentioned, many people would say, certainly everyone wants domestic tranquility. But as we pointed out in other programming, many people in the criminal justice system, particularly lawyers who profit from having that chaos and turmoil within their community, because that's where crime occurs, that's where discord happens when we're dealing with businesses, and businesses can't function the way they want to because there's overregulation. Our government is supposed to be based upon simplicity. If people know the laws and they know that they'll be enforced effectively, then the vast majority of people are willing to go by those laws if they are just laws. But a group of individuals who make their money from that turmoil would not be for domestic tranquility. We need to recognize that, and you need to watch our program that deals specifically on the issue of lawyers in that system. Currently, we have lawyers serving as judges in almost all situations except the very lowest courts. Judges make decisions, and they're supposed to make decisions based upon the evidence that's presented before them. All too often, there is a hidden agenda that says that it's more important to make sure that lawyers keep working and they profit from the system that's in place rather than to reduce the turmoil, which, remember, today we're talking about domestic tranquility. So tranquility is that kind of peacefulness, the idea where you and I can walk in our neighborhoods and not have the fear of being assaulted by someone, not having the fear of being confronted by individuals who are going to drastically change our life by either taking our property, causing us injury, or even death. Further in that domestic tranquility area, you don't have tranquility when people are excited about something and they're screaming and hollering. Recently, I went to a protest outside of a politician's home. And the individuals protesting knew that it was going to create turmoil. It wasn't going to create domestic tranquility in that community. It was going to stir that community up, even though most of the people in that community had nothing to do with that particular politician and his policies. For those who want a situation where we have a tranquil environment, we have a calm, a reasonable environment, we cannot possibly have it if we don't address the fact that there are people who profit and want that turmoil. In discussing the situation with some of these protesters, and I've been involved in protests, and they do have their purpose. This is not to say that they don't, but there's a way to do it, in my opinion, that says to the community, we care about you, we simply want to make a point that something is wrong, and we want you to help address it. This is about respect for others. And having worked in a prison environment and law enforcement situations, having been to demonstrations, having been involved with organizations that believe in even somewhat violent demonstrations, I can tell you that seldom does it seem to accomplish anything other than creating additional turmoil. To get people on your side, to have them listen to you when you're screaming and hollering and calling them names, having signs that, again, without referring to particular names, but having names that none of us really want to be called, to me is not the way that we arrive at that purpose, or one of the purposes of the Constitution, which is to ensure domestic tranquility. All too often it's the politicians, the people who we have or who we allow to serve in office, who create much of that turmoil. We've seen it here in many months past, where even the President of the United States, where he could have interceded and he could have called for calm, he uses words that incite. And actually, there's a crime of inciting a riot. And I understand that people have strong feelings, but when you want to solve a problem, in my opinion, the way to solve that is to make sure that you're sitting across or standing across for someone who understands that you have respect for them as a human being and you're willing to listen to what they have to say. Seldom is that the situation with many of the demonstrations and even riots that we have here in the United States. I've talked somewhat about the current president. In a few days, we'll have another president. But we've had one for 8 years, and all too often we've seen a situation where instead of basing things on facts, personal feelings have come into play, and that particular individual has even referred to police officers who were doing their job as less than intelligent. Many people don't understand what law enforcement is about, and oftentimes when I talk to people across New York State and beyond, when you get right down to what their job is, most everybody wants them to do a good job at what they're supposed to do. But because we don't understand what their function is, because we don't understand that if they choose not to allow us to do something in particular, it may actually be for our own good. They know how a riot can get out of control. And they know that it can be devastating for people who are there, even somewhat innocent people, because things can get out of hand quickly. But yet, oftentimes, those are the individuals that don't understand law enforcement, who criticize them, and really don't want them present when they're demonstrating. We had a situation recently where law enforcement officers who were present to try to keep people from being harmed were targeted by one individual and ultimately killed. I would have liked certain segments of the groups that were protesting to come out and express their concern over the killing of those officers. But unfortunately, what happened is many of the leaders expressed the opinion that it wasn't such a bad thing and maybe they deserved to be killed. Law enforcement officers, like anyone else, in any other field, there are good officers and there are bad officers. And having been an officer myself, I've always tried to stand against those officers who were doing things wrong. It's not easy to do, but it's necessary, and we need officers with the courage to stop those individuals who are doing the things that are wrong. This is about domestic tranquility. If our communities can't trust those who have the power to make an arrest, take away their freedom, put them in jail, seldom is it likely that you're going to have domestic tranquility. Those officers are part of what creates a condition that gives us domestic tranquility. To meet with people who have differing views is an obligation of those who are trying to work towards the goal of ensuring domestic tranquility. When a president or a legislator, when an individual police officer, when a mayor says things that incite others to take further action. When they make statements such as to police officers and they tell them to stand down and allow people to burn down a community and not hold those people responsible, and those things have happened in modern times, how would anyone expect to actually reach the goal of ensuring domestic tranquility? Certainly they are not ensuring it. And I believe their goals are actually the opposite. Their goal is to stir things up. And I like to mention the fact that you would think that government officials would like things to go smoothly. But realize government officials, if they're not principled people, are focused on their power. After all, most of the politicians realize that most of their time in office is spent raising money so they can run again for office. We'll address that in another program because it's not necessary. But they understand that that gives them power. And they don't want their power challenged. And one of the ways they can ensure that it's not challenged is to make sure that the people are focused not on the quality of their work and who they're engaged with, whether there's any corruption involved. They're focused on being afraid of walking in their own community. It takes the focus off of them as public officials. Now, you've heard me say it before. Public officials hate to hear this. They work for you. They work for me. If you say that to a police officer, he's liable to get very angry at you. And to be honest about it, they're liable to then start looking at other things that they might be able to charge you with. Because they don't like to face the fact that the people in the community, oftentimes the people who may be even protesting on some issue, actually pay their salaries. The same goes for those officials who are in the white-collar area, if you wish. They're not going to get their hands dirty wrestling with someone out on the street. They're not going to rush in and try to save someone's life. They're going to sit at a desk and they're going to make demands from all the people because it's convenient for them or it's politically profitable for them. In the way of an example, we know here in New York State that we have politicians, including the governor of this state, who believe that you should not have a right to protect yourself from violent individuals. Really what they're saying is that you have to prove that I can trust you before I will give you permission to possess a firearm that would allow you not only to protect yourself, but innocent others. If we look at the shootings around the country, and certainly here in New York State, oftentimes those shootings take place where signs are posted where no firearms are permitted. Those shooters know that the likelihood of anyone having a firearm who could actually keep them from pursuing what they wanted to do, which is create chaos, to go against the idea of domestic tranquility. They know that if they're going to do this and be successful, the best place they can choose is a place where there's less likely to be someone responsible, an honorable person, in possession of a firearm capable of stopping them from doing this terrible deed to inflicting pain and suffering on innocent people, which is their goal. they are against the idea of domestic tranquility. And they can be successful because there aren't good and decent people in that group who are able to protect themselves. This doesn't mean to say they wouldn't if they could. And it doesn't mean that they wouldn't be capable if they had the tools, the means to be able to do it. And I challenge anyone who would face a situation where someone is coming at them, perhaps not even with a firearm, perhaps with a knife or a club or a pipe, and maybe 2 or 3 of them. And you tell me honestly that you wouldn't want the ability to be able to keep them from harming you and your children, for example, your wife, other innocent people. Most everyone I know would at that moment pray, if they didn't have a firearm available or the means to stop that, they would pray that someone who had a firearm would come by in order to convince those people not to continue what they were doing, which is probably your destruction, the pain and the suffering and the misery. You know that we're about honorable people, because honorable people are necessary to have an honorable nation. Yet we have people in office who are not honorable people. If you've been watching, you've heard me address other situations where our politicians have the ability, and I might as well refer to it because it's so vitally important to who we are. In the statement of purpose, you've heard me name 2 groups who are the object of all this nation does. And it is the law of the land that says its purpose is to secure the blessings of liberty to not only ourselves, but also our posterity, which is all our descendants until the end of time. If you've been watching, you've heard me say that numerous times. And very shortly, we'll be confronting a number of politicians who have been, in essence, given an ultimatum. That ultimatum is either protect that second group named in the Constitution, the unborn descendants, the posterity of the people of the United States, or determine that you will no longer do the job and leave office. Because in reality, you no longer hold office. And the only difference between you staying in that office and being removed is the will of the people who we need to challenge, to have the guts, to meet the responsibility to treat innocent others as we wish to be treated. And the innocent others are those who are named our posterity, the unborn descendants of the people of the United States. Friends, it's really up to you. We do this programming. I want to thank the people who helped produce it. They're dedicating their time in order to provide information to you that is vital to us becoming that honorable nation. And in order to do that, we have to focus on domestic tranquility. We need to be able to sit down with those who want the same goals as we do. And we need to recognize those who do not, and we have to deal with them by removing them from office if they're holding office, because they have told us that they no longer care to be the people that we put into office. They're no longer willing to go by the rules which we find in the United States Constitution. You're going to have to determine what you're going to do with this information. You can contact us at honorablepeoplehonorablenation.org. You can contact us at FundamentalHumanRights.Org. Let us know that you're willing to step forward and do what is necessary in order to make us an honorable nation. We can provide the opportunity. Those of you who know me know that I'm God-based, and I believe that we have a mission, which is to care about our brothers and sisters and to care about who's doing those things that are wrong and to convince them, if possible, that they should cease doing that. I'm asking the politicians to change your ways. Be the people that you know we need and we expect from you. And if you choose not to do that, leave office. Because if you don't, we understand that domestic tranquility will never be a reality for the United States of America. I started this off talking about a new year. Well, it's a new year for you, and it's a new year for me. And what we do with this information, when we take the responsibility for what our nation becomes, the people in office will recognize their obligation to us because we won't let them forget it. And it is up to us that when laws such as, or supposed laws such as the New York State SAFE Act are passed, we need to stand up and make sure that those politicians pay the cost, are removed from office because they care nothing about you, because good and decent human beings not only have a right, they have a responsibility to care for those innocent others who deserve to have domestic tranquility, who deserve to walk in their communities in the poorest neighborhoods in our country. And those who don't live in those neighborhoods need to care enough about those who do that we lift them out of that cycle. And the only way to do that is by being the honorable people we need to be. God bless you all. This is Dan Devlin with the Detective Dan Devlin Show. Honorable people, honorable nation. Happy New Year.